Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about the new movie, Imaginary. If you end up enjoying this video, please consider liking and subscribing. That way I don't end up getting eaten by a giant teddy bear. The synopsis is as follows. When Jessica moves back into her childhood home with her family, her youngest stepdaughter Alice finds a stuffed bear named Chauncey. As Alice's behavior becomes more and more concerning, Jessica intervenes only to realize that Chauncey is much more than the stuffed toy bear she believed him to be. So without further ado, let's get into the 6 things that make a movie great. 1. The plot. Jessica, her new husband, and her husband's family are moving into Jessica's old childhood home. There's lots of strain in all of the relationships, and that causes a lot of drama in this part. But Jessica gets some relief when the youngest daughter, Alice, happens to find this stuffed animal bear. She aims at Chauncey and starts playing and having fun with it. But then Alice starts acting strange and this bear becomes a more sinister figure. And Jessica starts to realize that not only is the bear much more than that, but her own childhood was not at all what it seemed. This movie can be split up into 2 parts. The first part is about 3/4 of the film trying to be a horror film. The second part is only about 1/4 of the film, but it plays into kind of a fantasy horror that was actually a really interesting concept. And for me, it could have been a lot like Lock and Key. The issue is that this movie spent 3/4 of its runtime trying to make it a horror movie and never fully committed to what it could have been. In addition to that, the storytelling of this movie is pretty irritating. The movie tries to end like 3 different times, and you just kind of get fatigued from it. To be fair, there was a twist that was actually kind of good, but that was leading into the final quarter of the movie. But the reality is that the concept here was really, really good, but the director in this film had no idea what to do with it. And because of that, this movie and the storytelling is bad and boring. So for me, plot gets a thumbs down. 2 is family friendliness. Imaginary is rated PG-13. It has a mild to moderate bit of profanity, a couple disturbing moments that include blood and violence, and a handful of jump scares and creepy moments scattered throughout the film. Something I think also to be aware of is that while this isn't a creature horror movie, I also didn't really feel like it was a demonic horror movie either. It's kind of in between having to do with spirits. And that very well could be semantics, but for me it didn't really feel like a demonic movie. But either way, I don't feel like movies like this are really meant for a younger audience. So for me, family friendliness gets a thumbs down. 3 is acting and script. The acting in this movie is terrible. I thought DeWanda Wise might have something, and I think her performance was the best, but that's not saying much. Everyone else in this movie delivered pretty abysmal performances, and while I can't blame it completely on the script, it definitely played a huge part in it. The script of this movie is really, really bad. Almost every line of dialogue felt forced and awkward. All of the drama that this movie tries to create in between the family not only wastes time that it could have used with a much more interesting concept that was right there, but it just made the whole movie feel awkward and weird. There was no resolution to it, and it all seemed empty and meaningless. Also, Betty Buckley, who plays the character of Gloria, her role in this movie felt very similar to when like an author appears in their own movie rendition of their book. But Betty in this movie was just a walking exposition dump. And her character was written very strangely, and it was a very weird dynamic in the film. And it just showed how bad and lazy the script of this movie is. For me, acting and script get a thumbs down. 4 is character development. While there is some progression with the character of Jessica, there's not a whole lot of character development or anything deep or meaningful between any of the characters. Like I said, there's a lot of drama in this family because Jessica's seen as the stepmom that's coming in and trying to be a mom, while the kids are slow to accept that and not really wanting to. They also randomly throw the biological mom in, and it literally leads to nowhere. It was just a total mess. I don't know why this movie focused on what it did and ignored the gold that was sitting right in front of them, which I can't really talk about because it's technically a spoiler. And I never ever put those in my videos. But if it would have focused on that instead of peddling out terrible versions of everything else, then there could have been something here. But unfortunately with character development, there's nothing here. So character development gets a thumbs down. 5 is visuals and CGI. There's a bit of CGI in this movie, and it's not bad. Again, I do think that in the last quarter of the movie, there was a lot of more interesting visuals and things that could have been focused on more. But for most of the movie, it's honestly like 2 or 3 useless jump scares that are just dumb and tired. And you don't get much of anything else that's very interesting. But for what you did get, the visuals and CGI weren't terrible, but they weren't anything to write home about. So for me, visuals and CGI, I get a 50-50. And 6 is rewatchability. Imaginary is an hour and 44 minutes long. And while the runtime isn't bad, this movie felt long because of the multiple endings and because 3/4 of the movie is just boring. I may cry because there could have been something here, but I'll never be watching this movie again. So for me, rewatchability gets a thumbs down. With all these areas considered, I have to give Imaginary a 3 out of 10. Pretty much everything about this movie was bad. Really cheesy acting performances, no character development, but a lot of drama that meant nothing. Poor and boring storytelling that wasted a ton of time and ignored the most interesting and cool part of the movie. But Blumhouse always be Blumhousen, and they've done it again. So with all that in mind, Imaginary is not worth going to watch in theaters, and probably not worth streaming once it drops out either. Thank you so much for watching. If you've seen Imaginary, please let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. As always, I appreciate your love and support, and I'll catch you guys and gals in the next one.